Lego, Lego, Lego. This toy brand needs no introduction. Me, you, and basically everyone knows what Lego is. It's these blocks where you could connect, build, and create. This toy brand has been around since 1949 and continues to be a worldwide success, with nothing to stop them, until the sun explodes. But however, I'm not going to talk about the full history of the Lego brand, because, let's face it, if I do talk about it, then we may be here for a very long time. Instead, I'll talk about what the audience really came in for, and that's the Lego video games. Since the beginning of the mid-90s, the Lego series has been around from all different video game formats, like computers, consoles, handhelds, and even mobile devices. Though some hardcore gamers found most of the Lego games to be samey since the mid-2000s, and the never-ending of a lot of multiple franchises who collaborated with Lego. But whether you like it or not, the series still rakes in a bunch of money, since the demographic for those games are from young children to young teens. But there are some majority of teens and adults that also play them, either for nostalgia or a fan of the franchises. So in a way, it's basically for everyone in a certain group. Now, with all that said, the question still remains. How were the Lego games were made, and how it did for reviews back in the past. But before we do that, here are some ground rules. 1. This is only going to be based only on the history aspect only. 2. Neither of us played every single Lego game, so no reviews segment this time. And also going to give credit to these people down in the description below. And 3. This is a multi-part series, meaning I have to split these up into halves and would be releasing mostly a video once a month. Or twice if we get lucky. And last but not least, I want to introduce you to my collab partner for this history of Lego video games, but also a fan of Lego and Lego video games. Everyone, meet Rebellious Robot.
Hey everyone, I'm really psyched to be here. If anything, Lego is a high-tier passion for me. Sure, I do have other interests, however, Lego holds a high priority.
Glad to hear that. Anyways, are you ready to talk about it?
You bet I am.
Okay then, so join me and Rebellious Robot as we talk about the full history of Lego video games. Here we go. The first Lego game ever made is somewhat a strange one. The title's called Lego Fun to Build, with no clue what day was released at, but do know that the month and year was released in December 1995. It was published and developed by both Sega and the Lego Group, and it was a game that was only exclusive to the Sega PICO. Now many of you are asking, what is a Sega PICO? Well, let me give you a small quick info about it. The Sega PICO is a video game console, or also known as an edutainment console, that was released in June 1993 in Japan, a year later in November 1994 in North America, and a month later in December 1994 in Europe, by Sega Toys, which was specifically towards younger children. The system uses a touchpad and a pen that you could draw and animate on the screen, alongside with a large face button and a D-pad. The games used a special kind of cartridges called storyware, which took the form of a picture book. And whenever you flip into a new page, the screen changes, which at the time was very impressive and unique. Unfortunately, it wasn't that popular in both North America and Europe, and were both discontinued in February 1998, lasting about almost 4 years. However, the system in Japan was highly popular and even managed to last until its discontinuation in 2005, roughly about 12 years. For an edutainment system, it's kinda shocking and impressive that it managed to last this long. Anyways, back to the main topic. there actually isn't any info about how the game was made, since again, the system wasn't that popular in North America. But I could tell you how it plays out. In the game, you offer 4 levels, which are Town, Aqua Zone, Castle, and Space. Within these levels are 5 building puzzles, with the exception of the Space level having 6. The main of the goals are obviously assembling them, but the player must choose among 6 parts, which to add next to complete the model. There's also a score that is shown for how many seconds it took to build the model, which the lower the score, the better of a new record. After that, some of the building puzzles would be followed up by a minigame by using the model you built. Once you finished everything, there's really nothing else to do. The only thing left is free build mode, which allows the player to create their own model or customize an existing model using your own imagination out of a digital Lego pieces. And also drawing too, since it is the PICO after all. And that's about it. There were no reviewers for the game due to the fact that the PICO wasn't that popular in the West, but also the fact that the game was released in Japan only. Hence why the people outside from Japan barely remembers the game's existence. And finally, this is the only Lego game in history to be released on a Sega console. And for Sega's only game for their edutainment system, no doubt, it's kinda pathetic. And a huge shame that Sega never got any more games after that. But hey, what happens, happened. Though the series' debut may have started a bit rocky, however, their next game would not only be released in North America for the first time, and the first to be released only for home computers, but it would forever be Lego's most famous and well-remembered game in the late 90s.
Before the development for the next game, there was a developer of edutainment software based in Novato, California. The head of one of the company's departments was looking for a partner company in the toy industry, and after some research, settled for the Lego Group, the producer of the Lego line of toys. Mindscape subsequently hired Wes Jenkins, who in turn brought on Paul Melmid. Jenkins and Melmid drafted a game concept based on the town theme of Lego sets. Both attended the Toy Fair in New York City in February 1995, pitching the concept to the Lego Group, though unfortunately the Lego Group already made a game similarly on that pitch, which you already know was Lego fun to build, like we previously mentioned. Meanwhile, the Lego Group had established the Futura Research and Development Group in Boston, which was looking at the possible intersections between Lego products and digital media, including video games and virtual reality experiences. In 1995, the Lego Group employee Tormod S. Skildson was tasked with exploring the company's potential venture into the video game market. He hired a handful of people and prepared a report titled Elvis, which he presented during a workshop on December 21st, 1995. The report stated that the Lego Group's entrance into the video game market was a necessity rather than an option. And finally, the Lego Group needed to find both a publisher and developer to create the game. The only company that could do that was a video game company from Northbrook, Illinois. Mindscape, a game company who are well known for making good and bad games at the same time, once they made an agreement to make that said project, they ultimately made the deal, and thus both the Mindscape and the Lego Group jointly announced their collaboration for a Lego-branded personal computer game on January 27, 1996, and aiming to release a game in the fourth quarter of that year. Jenkins headed the project as its creative director, while Melmid acted as the education and research director. Other leads included senior producer Scott Anderson, director of development Dennis Goodrow, project manager Marie Collins, and lead 3D artist Dave Patch. Lead programmer Jim Brown was hired at Anderson's request. The development team eventually grew to more than 100 people, which allowed for the inclusion of multiple playable characters in the game, as proposed by Melmid, who had a background in psychology. Each of these characters would represent a different form of intelligence, as described by Howard Gardner's series of multiple intelligences. The development team created a bespoke game engine which was used to render 3D environments and to be used for LEGO Island and potential sequels called DirectX. According to Brown, graphics accelerators were in their infancy, so LEGO Island was designed to work on computers that did not have one, while simultaneously being able to take advantage of an accelerator if one was available. Jenkins, his wife Kyle, and Anderson created a real-world model of the game's island, and the development team invited children to play with the set, observing how these children would interact with the various elements. According to Anderson, girls tended to decorate the island such as with trees, while boys were more interested in racing elements. Subsequently, more of the game's elements, including the skies and trees, were made customizable, with the goal of incentivizing girls to play the game. In the so-called yes meetings, team members could present any further ideas they had to the rest of the team. If another member agreed, the proposer would sleep over it and on the next game try to frame a realistic implementation of the feature. During the middle of 1996, the LEGO Group established LEGO Media as its video game division based in London, invested $2 million in the development of LEGO-themed video games, and created Darwin, a strategic product unit that absorbed most of Futura. Mindscape regularly communicated with LEGO Media and Darwin, which led to the inclusion of further buildings and vehicles in the game, as well as the exclusion of non-LEGO elements like ropes. In January 1997, Mindscape and the LEGO Group reintroduced the game, now titled Adventures on LEGO Island, and scheduled for release in the third quarter of 1997. Unfortunately, one day prior to the release, Mindscape out of nowhere fired the entirety of LEGO Island's development team, to the shock of everyone. Why did Mindscape all of a sudden decide to lay off their employees like that? Well, the reason why was because the company had a program for bonuses in place, so several of the affected employees believed that Mindscape laid them off solely to avoid paying royalties. The reason may seem out of touch, but given the fact that Mindscape has been a bit ruthless due to caring about the profit of the quantity of games rather than the quality of games, and it definitely shows, but also that the company was having financial troubles at the time during its development. Thankfully, LEGO Island wasn't one of those games, and they did not delay the game at the last minute, because when it was released on September 26, 1997, it was a massive success in the United States, and sold over 909,000 copies between 1997 and 1999, making it the 15th best-selling computer game of that period. It was the country's 11th best-selling computer game in 1997, with 323,085 units sold and almost $12 million earned in revenue. It reached 8th place on the United States chart for the January-November 1998 period. It ultimately placed 7th for the full year of 1998 with 404,858 sales. Its revenue that year alone was over $10.2 million, and even won the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences 1997 Family Kids Entertainment Title of the Year award. The following year, it dropped to the 15th position on the annual sales chart with 309,698 units sold. The success of LEGO Island revived Mindscape's business, which was in trouble at the time. The company's total sales rose by 90% in 1997, driven primarily by LEGO Island, and in 2016, Sam Loveridge of Digital Spy ranked LEGO Island as the 14th best LEGO game in a list of 15. As for the game, it is a non-linear video game played from a first-person perspective, which the player can choose to roam around and customize the island, build vehicles with the help of a mechanic called Building, or complete a series of missions including pizza delivery, jet ski racing, and catching an escaped prisoner known as a Brickster. It features 5 playable characters: protagonist Pepperoni, his caretakers Mama and Papa Briccolini, and police officers Laura and Nick Brick, who each have their own unique abilities. There are also Easter eggs, but we're not going to talk about it. With that said and done, LEGO Island still remains in the top spot for most LEGO games, and would even spawn 2 sequels after that. Unfortunately, Mindscape would not return and would not have any involvement with the LEGO Island series after that, though originally they had been conceptualizing and prototyping a follow-up to the game, titled Beneath the Fantasy, which would have explored the importance of ecology and environmentalism from an educational perspective. However, after the release of LEGO Island and the firing of employees who worked on the game, the LEGO Group terminated Mindscape's license for future LEGO-based games. Though Mindscape would continue to make games after that, they unfortunately closed down the studios and ultimately went defunct on August 10th, 2011. And as for Wes Jenkins, as director of the game, he never made any other games after that, marking LEGO Island as his final game because Jenkins sadly passed away on September 24th, 2017. Though he may be gone, his game would live on for a long time as one of the greatest children's games ever made in the late 90s.
Now with the new publisher division, LEGO Media developed their next 3 games, which would be set to be released in 1998, and would be all released on the same day of November 11th. Starting with the first one being LEGO Loco, developed by Intelligent Games. The game is a simple open-ended construction game with an emphasis on rail transport, with the aim of the game is to construct a town in which LEGO people live in. When you begin the game, the player is bestowed a toy box, which they can build from buildings, from lists, and places them directly into the space provided. They can put down roads, railway lines, stations, crossings, buildings, and scenery. The player must choose the toy box and the town will come to life, though the player can open it again to make changes, save the town, or open a new one. After a while, LEGO figures will begin moving into the houses provided, if any, and the player can, like with ordinary figures, pick them up and place them elsewhere. This can affect the figure's mood depending on where it's placed. Using the train house, the player can create trains to run on the railway lines. If a train has passenger carriages, it will stop at any stations that have been placed alongside the track. The player can control the train's speed and direction and add a mail carriage to the train, thus enabling it to carry postcards that have been created by the player. These trains can also go through tunnels that the player can place at the edge of the map, and some tunnels can be used to help exchange postcards with other players, provided a network has been set, though I'm not sure if the servers of the network are still up and running or have been shut down. When it was released, it had some successes, but no reviews for the game aside from rating scores and whatnot. But still, it is fairly a decent railroad simulator game for LEGO gamers if they are very interested with the game.
Then the second one there was LEGO Chess, developed by Chrysalis Software. The game is obviously chess, but with Legos. Believe it or not, despite being just a simple chess game with LEGO, it has a story mode, in which in that mode the player can pick either a Western or a Pirates theme. After selecting the theme, a 3-game chess tournament against the AI begins. In the first game, the AI is at 25% difficulty, in the second game, the AI is at 50% difficulty, and the third final game, the AI is at 75% difficulty. Before each match, a cutscene playing is ending with the protagonist having a task to complete. In the Western theme, a sheriff is trying to capture 3 bank robbers, and in the pirate theme, a soldier is trying to beat some pirates to a treasure. After each match is over, another cutscene plays with the protagonist either succeeding or failing the task, depending on the match's outcome. After completing a story, a printable certificate is rewarded. There are also 2 other modes like tutorial mode, where the game teaches how to play chess, from the basics of movements for the different pieces to advanced playing techniques. The player is taught by the Chess King, a LEGO King minifig who talks like Elvis, and who supposedly commands the White Army. The Chess King slightly modernizes the explanations of the pieces. For example, it is said that the reason knights can jump over other pieces is that they ride BMX motorbikes. The King on a Throne was also a LEGO set packaged with the first release of the game. And then there is Versus Mode, where the player can choose the difficulty of the game when playing against the AI of multiplayer mode. Alternatively, the player can watch the computer play against itself. In addition, a third traditional chess set, though still constructed from LEGO group bricks, can be chosen, and all 3 sets can be mixed. Pirates playing against Western, for example. However, animations for capturing pieces are disabled when playing with mixed sets. Players can also remove or add pieces from gameplay before or during the game. When it was released, it too had some success and even received favorable reviews from game critics, stating its creative way of using Lego pieces as a fun, entertaining way of playing chess. Other reviews was not as positive due to the bland style of the cutscenes and claimed the cutscenes featuring the tribal drum noise were creepy. So overall, Lego Chess was a bit of an average chess game with Lego that would appease interest to young children, but still a decent game to play.
And finally, the third and final one, and probably the most interesting one out of the three releases in 1998, was Lego Creator, developed by Superscape. The main gameplay was intentionally conceived of as an evergreen replication of the physical toy. Starting with the town range, the game would expand for each release with the addition of further product themes. Functionality would also be enhanced with each content pack. Ultimately, individual ranges remained independent, and emphasis shifted to a play experience, with reduced emphasis on free-form construction. Originally, it had been hoped that the sheer scale of unlimited bricks might offset the loss of tactile merit, but such hope was compromised by the computers of the day. Plans included being able to build content which would be seemingly dropped into separate Lego video games. But unfortunately, this was dropped as the complexity of doing so was further explored. And by the time the Harry Potter theme was introduced to the game, which we'll get to that in a few minutes, the series had shifted far from the original premise of free-form Lego construction. Instead, the product moved toward a more limited build environment, but still had superior gameplay. In addition to the regular bricks in an assortment of colors, there are specified action bricks, which move or make noise. Examples include the hinge, propeller, and siren. There is also a destructive brick, a 1x2 tile with an image of a dynamite superimposed on it. This can be used to destroy models in play mode, although the player's creations will automatically rebuild when returning to build mode. Minifigures can also be used, like stand, sit, and walk, and can be set to drive vehicles set to a path or road. In play mode, minifigures and vehicles can travel around the environment. Special bricks can be interactive with. The sky can be set from day to night, and the player can control or see from the perspective of any minifigures set to move around, vehicles, and security cameras. The minifigures from the game don't speak proper English like Lego Island, so instead they speak in gibberish sounds during play mode. And finally, the game's instruction manual details how to replace the audio files for these sounds with custom files. When it was released, it was also a success and possibly the best out of the three games released, which received 4 awards at the Computer Game Developers Spotlight Award, Best Children's Game at Cody Software Publishers Association Excellence in Software Awards, Best New Home Creativity Software US, and Top 100 Family Tested from Family PC Magazine, and Pin Quality Mark Gold Award from Parents Information. It was also nominated at the 2nd Annual Interactive Achievement Awards for Computer Children's Game of the Year. Naturally, with being a success, they made 3 standalone sequels, one from one of Lego's brand, and the last 2 from a non-Lego brand, which I'm going to talk about them right now in this segment, because they play the exact same thing, but with some differences, like the already mentioned limiting amount of different settings and challenges. like LEGO creator Knight's Kingdom, released in October 4th, 2000, which you have 4 challenges you have to compete in, with each one consists of using different models and moving around the LEGO world. There are also 2 challenges to do before new models can be built. And lastly, these challenges involve working with different LEGO bricks and putting them together into a model. Then there was LEGO creator Harry Potter, released in October 26, 2001, which marks the first LEGO game based on a licensed property, and also based on the 2001 movie Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer's Stone, depending which country you lived in, where you go into 4 general areas plus 5 extra areas. The area of inside Hogwarts have 4 place-able extra rooms to reach other areas, including Professor Snape's potions class and the Forbidden Corridor. The game includes many features that give the player a lot of creative ability. These features includes taking control of minifigures and animals, driving the Hogwarts Express, changing the weather from rain to snow to night to day, casting spells and flying on broomsticks, and creating your own minifigures and models with classical and Harry Potter style LEGO faces, bodies, cloaks, and even wands, while the workshop contains castle pieces to extras to standard pieces. And finally, there was creator Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, released in December 6, 2002. Not only it was the second LEGO Harry Potter game, as well as based on the 2002 movie of the same name, but it was the only installment not to be developed by Superscape, but instead by Cube Software. And it also had 2 publishers, one by LEGO Media, of course, and the other one by Electronic Arts, or EA for short. While the sequel contains many of the same features as the debut game, but it contains a lot more additional features that were added to enhance the player's creative ability, including more models, more worlds, and more minifigures. Certain characters or animals can reach certain areas of the game, and completing tasks will unlock different worlds and models the player can use in their own world. All of these tasks are featured in the tutorials, which show the user all the features of the program, and that takes care of all the LEGO Creator games. Or I could say that it's fun and enjoyable to play, whichever version you pick.
The next one up is LEGO Friends, released in June 1st, 1999, developed by Flipside Limited and Ivanov Interactive A/S. And it is one of those games that people barely remember about its existence during the 90s. The main plot of the game is that you're a manager for Tough Stuff, and you're helping for an all-girl band who are practicing to win the high school music competition. So you can create your own music, stage lighting, and dance routines, alongside with many different activities. It also comes with a printable scrapbook and an interview with Loose Chippins, an all-girl British pop band that only lasted for 3 years from 1998 to 2001, and that's about it. Honestly, there's really nothing about this game that stands out, and there's no reviews about this game, with the only exception being Moby Games. But looking at the user and critic reviews, it may have been seen somewhat of a success, but that's not saying much. And also the fact that they were given 5 stars feels a bit far-fetched, if you know what I mean. But I think the real reason why this game is forgotten is because this doesn't feel like a LEGO game at all, outside of the name only. And do you want to know the strange thing? The title LEGO Friends would later be reused as another official LEGO brand 13 years later in 2012, which also had a line of video games as well, though having no connection to the 1999 game. But we'll get to those later down the line. And for the 1999 LEGO Friends game, it's not a bad game, but it's obviously a forgettable one.
Later, at the same year, they would make a racing game not just for the PC, but for the first time since 1995's Fun to Build, and also the first one in the United States would be released for home consoles, and also the first one to be on a handheld as well. The concept all started when it was initially created by High Voltage Software founder Kerry J. Ganofsky, with the idea of players being able to build and race cars created with Lego bricks. After a year of development, LEGO Media collaborated with High Voltage Software and began production on the game, hiring Ganofsky's company to develop it. LEGO Media and other facilities within the LEGO Group also collaborated with High Voltage Software during the production of the game. A large number of character models, documents, and pictures from different LEGO system characters and models were sent to the developers, who eventually choose to use the castle, space, adventures, and pirates themes in the game. High Voltage Software chose the characters they liked best from these themes and created character studies for them to capture the mood of each persona. Certain characters would assume the role of bosses, while others were featured as less skilled opponents. The developers also created two original characters, Rocket Racer and Veronica Voltage, marking their debut for the game. The team spent over a year creating car building mechanics with the game's lead programmer, Dwight Lucher, creating a formula that was used by the game's artists to create individual LEGO elements in the game. The pieces available to the player were selected from hundreds of LEGO elements by the developers, chosen first by aesthetics, and then analyzed to see if they would fit into Lucher's formula. The developers chose to affect the attributes of the player's car, such as handling, acceleration, and top speed, through how many bricks are placed on the chassis, as this is simpler to understand for the game's main age demographic. Due to the higher number of LEGO sets and pieces in the game, a custom mesh code was created to weld the geometry in place and optimize the car's polygon count, creating one solid mesh for each car created by the player. Every element in the game, including bricks and character pieces, had different levels of detail created for the use in menu screens and cutscenes, where the models had to be a higher quality due to the player seeing them up close. The developers planned a damage system where bricks could break apart from the car upon crashing, but this presented too many problems to make it a real possibility, so it was scrapped in process. The game, now called LEGO Racers as the final title, was available to play before release by journalists at E3 1999, showing off how it plays and many features for the game. When it was first released for the PC, mainly Microsoft Windows, on August 21st, 1999, it received some favorable reviews, with the graphics being praised by critics like Andrew Seun Park from GameSpot, stated that virtually everything in the PC version looks bright, colorful, and clean when playing in 3D accelerated mode, but called its texturing minimal. And another reviewer, Trent C. Ward from IGN, also praised the PC version's background animations, stating that they not only add to the atmosphere of the game, but also affect the way it plays. Unfortunately, not all of them were positive about the game. There are some who are very mixed, like Dean Heffer from EGM called the game's racetracks short, unimaginative, and devoid of good shortcuts. Another EGM reviewer, Crispin Boyer, stated that the lack of multiplayer options hurts LEGO Racers' replay value. However, despite the criticism, it was still another success for LEGO Media, the LEGO Group, and High Voltage Software. Naturally, this would get home conversions of the game, starting with the PlayStation version in September 1st, 1999, in Europe first. Then later, a North American release in December 17th, 1999. And then the Nintendo 64 version would be next in October 12, 1999 in North America first, then later a Europe release in December 1st, 1999. Though the graphics, visuals, and frame rate may be different, it still plays the exact same thing like its computer counterpart. But unlike the PC version, which received general reviews, both PS1 and N64 ports were mixed by critics. Like Chris Carla from Next Gen called the N64 version's frame rate nauseatingly slow. And another reviewer from Sam Bishop stated the PlayStation version's load times between levels are horrendous. However, that's all they ever talked about and say that the game plays fine enough, though still gave some mixed reaction from critics. Then a year later, the LEGO series would make their handheld debut with the Game Boy Color version of LEGO Racers, originally released in December 29, 2000 in Europe, then later on in January 18, 2001 in North America. However, instead of being developed by High Voltage Software, it was developed by Climax Studios, a game company from Portsmouth, Hampshire, England. Though there were no reviewers for the game back then. But nowadays, it's considered to be the worst port out of all of them, and even one of the worst LEGO games ever made. Though I must say they did try to push the limitation to some degree and do like how they pulled it off, but that's not saying much. It's still a bad port, no doubt. Moving back to the PC version, it's a well-funded and enjoyable for a LEGO racing game. There are about 12 unique tracks to race, and have to race through 7 hosts to win the race, and can even play as the host and the vehicle. And don't forget to mention customizing your vehicle like always. Overall, the game is good. Sure, it's no Mario Kart and all that, but it still manages to be its own thing without completely ripping off the Mario Kart formula, and again, fun and enjoyable by LEGO fans, but also casual fans as well.
And finally, the last LEGO game from the 90s was LEGO Rock Raiders, released for the PC on November 3rd, 1999 in Europe. Then later, in November 18th, 1999 in North America. Then a year later, gets a PlayStation port in August 17, 2000 in North America. Then later, in fall 2000 in Europe. Both versions were developed by Data Design Interactive, however, despite having the same developer working on both games, they are completely different to one another. First, let's talk about the Windows version. This game is a real-time strategy game similar to Dungeon Keeper, and was the first video game for the LEGO Rock Raiders theme. The game opens with optional training missions and one actual mission unlocked. Most missions require the player to collect a certain amount of energy crystals. The required amount starts slow, but gradually gets higher in later missions. Some missions require the player to locate rock raiders that have been trapped in landslides, or to find certain pieces of equipment and bring it back to their base. One of the game's features is a priority menu. With this menu, the player can set what order rock raiders carry out their tasks. For example, the player can decide whether rock raiders should collect energy crystals or LEGO ore first. At the end of each mission, the chief would evaluate the player's work, examining the various aspects of the mission. With all these taken into consideration, the chief would give a mission rating percentage. And lastly, there are 25 missions total. Each of them is in either a rock, lava, volcanic, or ice cavern environment. Though it is not necessary to complete every mission with 100% or even complete all the missions. To complete the campaign, however, the player will unlock a better ending cutscene by completing the campaign in full. When the PC version released, it received some mixed reviews by critics, scoring by the margin in the middle, and also said to be a run-of-the-mill average game for kids. Then there was a PlayStation port, but unlike the Windows version, which was a real-time strategy game, this version plays more like an action and strategy game in which the player controls a character instead of just commanding a squad. While the former was centered on constructing a base and mining, the latter centers on exploring, which most of the missions require the player to collect a certain amount of energy crystals, while some other missions require the player to rescue rock raiders that have been trapped by landslides. There are a total of 18 campaign missions and 6 multiplayer missions, but all completely different between the NTSC and PAL versions of the game. The only difference in the PAL version includes 3 bonus missions that are accessible after the campaign is completely finished, and 12 additional multiplayer missions for using levels from the main campaign. And finally, rather than a percentage at the end of each mission, you receive either a bronze medal, minimum required objectives complete, a silver medal, most objectives complete, or a gold medal, all objectives complete in a required time. When the port was released, it received even more mixed reviews by critics, saying that the game's scale rating is between from mildly average to just plain bad, making this the inferior version that the PC counterpart. And last but not least, the LEGO Rock Raiders brand, which the game was based off of, was discontinued shortly after the PlayStation port was released, and also due to the fact that 1, the brand lasted a year from 1999 to 2000, and 2, it wasn't that successful of a brand as they once thought by the LEGO group. There are some LEGO fans who do like the Rock Raiders brand and the video game, mostly the PC version of course, but it's certainly not one of LEGO's best games in the LEGO series, and most likely forgotten by a casual demographic, but at least it tried to say it at the very least.
So, now with the LEGO series and the brand entering the new decade and millennium, what happens next for the LEGO video games?
Well, we'll be back for the next part and find out.
Thanks for watching part 1 of the series.